Hi guys, welcome back to 17 square meters garden. In today's video we are gonna chat about how to help your potted plants survive winter. And right at the beginning of this video I would like to say that based on your guys' comments and messages, I know that you watch my videos from different corners of the world, which is absolutely amazing, but at the same time it makes it a bit tricky for me to make a video that will apply to everyone across different climates, across different growing zones, because obviously that winter protection will look a little bit different if you garden in zone 4, if you garden in zone 6, or if you garden in zone 8. But I came up with 10 tips, 10 step-by-step instructions on how to prepare your garden for winter and what to do with your plants, which plants need to be brought indoors, which plants can stay on the balcony or on your patio without any protection, which plants will require some sort of protection, how to protect them, and what mistakes to avoid. So I think that these tips, these step-by-step instructions are universal enough that you can apply them no matter what growing zone you live in. So hopefully you will find this video helpful. So let's begin. Okay, so let's start with some really basic information first. You could just hear me say we all garden in different growing zones. So if you're new to gardening and you don't know what that means, well, basically the world is divided into 13 growing or 13 hardiness zones. 1 to 13, 1 being the coldest, 13 being the warmest. But this only takes in consideration how cold it gets in winter. So winters in zone 1 are the coldest, where the temperature drops as low as -50 degrees Celsius or -60 degrees Fahrenheit. And in zone 13, winters are the warmest, where it's as warm as 20 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you don't know what your growing zone is, it would be a good idea to even pause this video and go check it online. Type the name of your country and add hardiness zones. For example, Germany, hardiness zones, France, hardiness zones. And this will show you the map of your country divided into hardiness zones. And based on this, you will know what growing zone you live in. And that's a quite useful information because all the plants are categorized into these growing zones. For example, no matter what plant name you type in Google and you add hardiness zones, this will tell you the hardiness zones of that plant. So what are the coldest winters that plant can support outside without any protection? For example, like let's take Thuja occidentalis, which is one of the evergreens that I have right behind me. If you type Thuja occidentalis hardiness zones, it will tell you that Thuja occidentalis can be grown in zones 3 through 8. So it means it can be grown in zone 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that means that this plant can tolerate winters in zone 3 without any protection. In zone 2, it will require some protection, or it may not even survive in that zone 2 because winters are too cold. But there's also that upper limit, that's zone 8, and that means that in warmer climates above zone 8, winters are not cold enough for that plant, because a whole range of plants need that cold winter temperatures, that frost even, to enter dormancy, to remain in that dormancy throughout the winter, and then to trigger their spring growth. Okay, so now that you know what your growing zone is and how to check the hardiness zones of your plants, there's just one little twist to it for us container gardeners. So that winter hardiness is always based on as if the plants were planted in ground. And obviously when plants are grown in containers, they're a little bit more fragile because obviously in ground the plant roots are isolated by the soil, and in containers those roots are exposed from all the sides. So usually when they say that a plant is winter hardy, let's say to zone 4, in containers the same plant will be more hardy to zone 5. If it says zone 6, treat it as if it would be hardy to zone 7. Okay, so let's move straight into those tips, those step-by-step advices. As I said, I will base it all on my balcony garden, but I think you can easily apply it to any garden, no matter what growing zone you live in. Just as an information, my balcony garden is in zone 8, so it is a fairly mild climate, but I myself grew up in a gardening family in zone 6. So I definitely know what -25 degrees Celsius feels like and what it does to your plants, especially those container-grown plants. And I also completed some container garden projects in colder zones. So all of these informations and experience combined, I hope that you will find this guide helpful. Okay, so the very first thing that I do to prepare my garden for winter is I remove and store all the saucers. It's not necessarily a good idea to keep them under your pots during fall winter, because that's usually a really rainy time of the year. So if there's a water accumulating in the saucers and your plants are standing in that water, they will surely become waterlogged, and that's the easiest way for your plants to rot. But if for some reason you want to keep them, for example, I keep mine but only these on the railing, because I don't want the water and dirt coming out of the pots to stain this white wall. So if that's the case also for you, you can keep them, but in this case pay attention. Don't ever let your plant standing in the water. If there's a water accumulating in the saucers, immediately pour it out. Okay, tip number 2, bringing plant indoors, and this will apply to all of us. If you have any tropical, any exotic plants, these can't tolerate temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius for longer periods of time. So if you grow any exotics, these should be brought indoors into your home or into your apartment. And one tip here, don't wait until the last moment, until it starts to get cold outside, because these plants will slowly start to get used to those cooler temperatures, and then when you bring them indoors, all of a sudden that shock of temperatures, that shock of humidity, it can really stress the plants. They can defoliate and even die. So bring them indoors already early in the fall. Now, for those of you who garden in colder climates, if you have plants that are tagged 2 or more growing zones above your zone, for example, you garden in zone 6 and maybe you have some plants that are only winter hardy down to zone 8 or 9. Maybe you have some Mediterranean plants, some bay laurel, olive tree, agapanthus, maybe you have some eucalyptus and stuff like that. These plants can tolerate some frost, but they will not necessarily tolerate the hard frost in your growing zone. So even if you protect them outside, they may still not make it. So it will be a better idea to bring them somewhere protected from hard frost, somewhere where it still stays cool, but protected from hard frost. For example, an unheated garage, maybe some cold hallway, some entryway, maybe a staircase in your apartment. So something like that, so protected from hard frost, but where it still remains cold enough for them to be either dormant or semi-dormant. Step 3, if you grow any frost-tender tuberous or bulbous plants, maybe you have dahlias, maybe tuberous begonias, canna lilies, caladiums or anything like that, and you would like to grow them again next year, you will have to cut back the foliage, dig up the bulbs, clean them and store them in a cool, dry place until you are ready to plant them again next year. Step number 4, for me, that's one of the most important steps. That's something that I do even before I actually protect my plants. I start already late summer to fertilize my plants with a potassium fertilizer. Potassium is a mineral that's responsible for a lot of things, among which are resistance and winter hardiness. So your plants naturally start to store more sugar and more potassium when they prepare for winter. So by giving them that booster of potassium, you are increasing their frost resistance. Potassium is a mineral that helps to strengthen plant tissues. It creates a pressure in plant cells, making them physically stronger, physically more resistant, and less likely to suffer from frost damage. And it's especially beneficial to those plants that are on the limit of their hardiness. So if you garden in zone 6 and you are going to overwinter plants that are winter hardy to zone 6, these can really benefit from a booster of potassium. It's not too late. As long as the soil is not frozen, you can still apply potassium fertilizer, and you can continue until the soil freezes and you can no longer apply any liquids on it. But your plants can definitely benefit from it. I've been doing that for the past 4 years and I swear by it. I overwintered zonal geraniums and other plants that are less hardy outside in temperatures -7 degrees Celsius without any issue. I'm not saying, that by applying potassium fertilizer you're gonna create some super plants, but it definitely does help, and it definitely boosts your plants and increases their winter hardiness. Step 5, those plants that stay outside without protection. For me, if a plant is tagged 2 or more growing zones below your growing zone, does not need protection and should not be protected. So if you garden in zone 7, you have plants tagged to zone 5, zone 4, zone 3, they can overwinter outside without protection. And you should not necessarily be protecting them, because as we mentioned at the beginning, some plants really need that cold temperature, those cold temperatures, that frost, to enter dormancy, to stay in that dormancy If a plant is not allowed to have that resting period, if it's kept too warm, then it will just keep on going, and at some point it will exhaust itself. So in a couple of years' time, the plant may start to look bad, it may even die. So it's really important to allow your plants to experience that cold, to experience frost, for their dormancy and also for their hardiness, because if you never let your plants the chance to experience frost, you will create very vulnerable plants and plants that will be sensitive to cold and to any frost damage or cold snap later on in the spring. Finally, step number 6, that's where we start the actual winter protection for those plants that stay outside but require a little bit more care. So for me, if a plant is stacked one zone above my growing zone and one zone below, these are the plants that stay outside but will require some sort of protection. So first of all, what you can do is bring all the plants in some sheltered position. That might be very close to a wall where they are protected from harsh winds, where it stays a little bit warmer. Bring them in the corner of your balcony or on your patio. If you have any plants on the shelves or on the table, on the potting bench, bring them low to the ground, because when they are standing high up, they are exposed to cold and drying winds. They are more exposed to frost. So bring them low to the ground, hide them in some corner, hide them under maybe a table or under a bench. Group plants together, because when plants are grouped together, they protect one another, they create a microclimate, they are less likely to suffer from frost. Advice number 7, or step number 7, if you have a concrete floor on your balcony or patio just like I do, it's a good idea to isolate your plants, to make a barrier between your plant and that cold concrete floor. So what you can do, you can place the plants on top of some pots or on top of some wooden crate. You can use an old rug or an old carpet or something like that, place it under the pots. I like to place some fleece underneath my pots to isolate them from that cold floor. Just make sure that the water can still drain away easily. Step number 8 is protecting your evergreens and your conifers. Most conifers are very winter hardy. They are hardy down to zone 4 or even 3. But oftentimes I hear people say, oh, my conifer died on my balcony, so in fact they are not that winter hardy as people say. And that's a very common misunderstanding, because frost is not the only danger in winter. Cold and drying winds can be as dangerous and as damaging as frost, especially for evergreens and conifers. So what happens is that your conifers or your evergreen plants, because they keep their foliage, they are not fully dormant. The plant still transpires, so it still loses moisture through the leaves, especially during cold and drying winds. So the plant loses a lot of moisture through the leaves. And then if you don't water your conifers, or if there's no moisture in the pot and the plant can substitute that moisture loss, it starts to dry out and die. And the problem with conifers is that they don't show the signs of drought until it's too late, until it turns completely brown in the spring and you go out and you think that it's frost that killed your plant, while it just simply dried out. So it's really important to keep your conifers watered during winter. They don't need a lot of moisture, but if the soil is dry, you have to water your conifers. And in milder climate, obviously, when the soil freezes only for short periods of time, like for example in my growing zone, the soil freezes only for days at a time, and then it thaws, and then it freezes again, and then, you know, the frost melts. So when it warms up a bit, I can water my conifers. But for those of you who garden in very cold climates where the soil freezes for longer periods of time, that's where it starts to be tricky, because if the soil is frozen, you can't water it and the plant can't absorb any moisture, and that's where the plant starts to dry up. So what you can do is, first of all, give your conifers a good drink in autumn. Make sure they are well watered, entering those cooler temperatures. And then what you can do, you can wrap the pot in bubble wrap, or put some straw around the pot, put some burlap bag or something like that. Or if it's a smaller pot, you can even put it in a carton box and fill that carton box with some, you know, whatever that might be, a straw, some old blankets or whatever. Just make sure, again, that the water can drain away easily. Step number 9 is probably the most obvious, but yet one of the most commonly made mistakes: wrapping your plant in fleece. Sure, fleece is great, and you should wrap your plants, your more tender plants, to protect them from hard frost. If the temperatures drop too low and it poses danger or a risk of dying to your plant, wrap your plant in fleece, protect it from that hard frost. But once that risk has passed, once the temperatures are no longer dangerous to your plant, you should remove that fleece and you should never ever keep it on for more than 2-3 weeks at a time. But oftentimes I see people wrapping their fully hardy trees or shrubs in that winter sleeve and leaving that on all the way until spring. And there are so many things that can go wrong because of that. By keeping it on for months at the time, you are creating a microclimate inside. So you are raising the temperature, you are raising humidity inside, so you are prompting your plant to premature growth. So late winter, early spring, your plant will wake up quicker than it should, and then that fresh, young growth is very vulnerable to late spring frost or to any cold snaps. So again, protect your plants with fleece, but never ever leave it on for longer than 2-3 weeks at a time. Once the temperature warm up, remove it, or at least open it, refresh it, allow this plant to have some cold air, fresh air circulate around it. Never leave it on for longer than 2-3 weeks at a time. Okay, so if you have made it until the end of this very long video, tip or advice or step number 10 is exceptions. Obviously there are always some exceptions, and for me the exceptions are young plants, baby plants, or plants that you recently repotted. These plants that haven't had the chance to acclimate or haven't had the chance to, properly develop their hardiness, these should be protected and they should be treated, as slightly more tender plants. So if you added any new plants to your garden this season, if you have any young trees, any young shrubs, any baby plants, these may require some extra protection, because even though they are theoretically winter hardy in your growing zone, just because they are young or just because they were recently repotted, they may not be fully hardy yet. So during that first season, it is worth to protect them. Okay, you guys, so as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I do hope that all the information that I shared in this video and all the examples that I showed you from my own balcony garden will be helpful to you and will help you take a good care of your plants this winter. If there's anything that you would like to add to my list or any tips that you found particularly helpful, don't hesitate to share them in the comments section. Thank you so very much for joining me today, and I will see you again next week with another balcony gardening project. Bye!